7:31, so I guess we'll get going. Hello. Uh, my name is Jeff Robertson. I'm the past president of the Edmonton Center of the RASC. Welcome to What's Up What's Up over Edmonton for the month of April. Normally, we do this on the first Wednesday of the month, but seeing the first, we got lots of people from Toronto. But as the March 31st fell on a Wednesday, I felt we should just do it now. And a couple more people coming, rather than wait a whole week to get into it. So I'm just going to share my screen here and go for a little bit. Okay. I see we have a few people from Toronto here, so welcome. It's nice to have people from out of town. I did see a notice on one of the national newsletters that my little session was being mentioned. So this is a excuse me. This is a Queen Elizabeth Planetarium, which is in Coronation Park. The Edmonton Space, or the TELUS World of Science, is that white building off to the right behind it. The Queen Elizabeth Planetarium was the very first public planetarium in Canada, and it opened in 1960 or 1961, I believe. When the Science Center opened, they shut down the QEP and used it for training and for storage, and then eventually it fell into disrepair. It was declared a historical site, and TELUS World of Science took over management. And the idea of these Wednesday night sessions, mine is not the only one, we have a few others, was we were going to have them in person in the QEP, which was supposed to open in June of 2020. Well, of course, the pandemic put a hold on everything. And we've been putting these things on Zoom ever since. This is actually the 12th edition of What's Up. So a bit of our anniversary here. Most of the information I use comes out of the Observer's Handbook, which is put out every year by the RASC, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And I also use periodicals like Astronomy and Sky News for additional information. The reason I call it What's Up over Edmonton is, tangled in my cord here, is because the magazines coming out of the States and also Sky News are based in Toronto, and they tend to look at the sky from where they are located. In Toronto, it's 43 degrees north latitude. We're at 53 degrees north latitude, so our sky is a little bit different. Which I will get into here. You may notice a few things as we get into the program. So what have we got coming up in April? Some April showers may need to be shoveled. And if anyone who's lived in Edmonton for any length of time knows that we usually get at least one big dump in April. And in the southern part of the province, they bring down power lines and all sorts of other stuff. They seem to get a lot worse than we do. So the zodiacal light is visible from a dark site in the early evening sky after twilight, early in the month, for about the first 11 days of April. Mars passes from Taurus into Gemini. We've been following the course of Mars throughout the year. There's a Lyrid meteor shower, which peaks in the early morning hours of April 22nd. After losing Jupiter and Saturn at the end of the year, they are finally coming back into the morning sky. And Venus, after going through conjunction with the Sun last month, is I guess in March, which is this month technically, it will start to come back into the evening sky. Although I will mention Venus, but I'll talk more about Venus next month because this month it's still pretty low and very difficult to see. And it's the last full month of dark skies here in Edmonton until August. We go into what we call perpetual twilight between May 13th and July 30th, where the sky never gets completely dark. So I'm going to just stop this and then go to my astronomy program. And here we go. Okay. The program I use for the astronomy portion is Starry Night, which I find fairly easy to use. Okay, so this is the sky in Edmonton at 9:30 tomorrow, April 1st. You'll see that it's a bit lit up because the sun has just recently set at 8 o'clock, but we still have a twilight sky. So in terms of the planets, we have Uranus sinking rapidly. It is a telescopic object. There's Mars, which has been moving through the constellation Taurus and is moving into Gemini through the month. We're going to say goodbye to the winter constellations. Throughout the evening, Orion will get lower and lower. Here, let me just advance this here, show you what I mean. We'll go 300 times. So as we go through the night, as the night steadily gets darker and darker, Uranus sets, and Canis Major with Sirius is setting, Orion setting. But over on the other side, we've got Virgo rising, Libra. We've also got, here, let me stop that. Okay. We've got Leo coming up. Now I've highlighted Vesta because Vesta is easily seen in binoculars right at this time. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Of course, the Ursa Major is riding fairly high up in the sky now this time of year, with Ursa Minor, or the Little Dipper, if you prefer to call it, is just below it. So I'm going to reset this here. It's days. Oh. Okay. Oh, this is being recorded if you want to go to our YouTube channel in a few days and watch it again. So as we advance through the month, notice as the month goes by mid-month, it's getting noticeably brighter. The moon joins Mars on the 16th. And right at the end of the month, we've got Mercury and Venus starting to pop up. Very, very low in the northwestern sky, just after the sun. And Mercury is above Venus at the end of the month, so it'll be an easier target to see than Venus itself, providing you have a clear horizon. And let's go to the morning sky here. I'm going to reset the date and go to AM and my time for setting. It's 5:30. Okay. There we go. Okay, this is the morning sky. I set it for 5:30 in the morning. And we see that Saturn is just starting to come up at that hour. And as we advance through the month, we have Jupiter and Saturn, and later on Neptune, which is a telescopic object, comes up for the end of the month. You'll notice that the ecliptic, this green line that's passing through here, the path which the moon, the sun, and the planets travel on, is very, very low at this time of year. Jupiter and Saturn are in what we call the summer sky, and they're going to be low in the south from our point of view for the next few years. Jupiter having the faster orbit will get out of there quicker than Saturn. And go to the end of the month. So what we have here is we see some of the constellations we normally associate with the fall, like Pegasus, Andromeda, and Perseus starting to come up at this early hour in April. Ursa Major has swung around so that it is no longer high in the sky. It's come down a bit. Arcturus, the bright star in Bootes, the herdsman, is quite prominent. From our latitude, Bootes disappears for a few months, but then returns about 11, start seeing it coming up about 11, 11:30. Our bedroom window faces east, and I've been watching it come up over the past few months. And below Bootes is the bright star Spica in Virgo. Normally, another fellow would be joining us, Alistair, who usually has something to add, but he's not here today, so I don't have anything else as far as the planetarium portion. I'm going to stop the share and ask, let's check the chat, are there any questions? You can unmute yourself or type something in before I move on to the next section.
What do you see when you look at the moon when it's full and round? Do you see a balloon? Does it look like a cookie with the
headphones were turned off, so if anyone had a question, I didn't hear you. So are there any questions?
It follows a path every month of the year.
Okay.
7 days, the first quarter appears.
All right, this is our section on the moon. So third quarter moon is on the 4th of April. On April 11th is the new moon. First quarter is on the 20th. And the full moon is on April the 26th. It's also the full moon in April is sometimes known as the pink moon. It's also known as the sprouting grass moon, the fish moon, the hare moon, or the egg moon. I don't know why it's called the fish moon. The hare moon, I presume, is because the hares, at least we have a lot of hares in my neighborhood, they turn from white back to brown for the summer. So maybe that's why they call it the hare moon. As far as the egg moon, I have no idea how it got that name. Okay, the feature that we're going to talk about this month, and I take these from the Explore the Moon certificate program from the RASC, the binocular version, because I feel that's the most, one that's open to most people. You don't need a telescope. So we're going to talk about two craters right up here. Oh, right up here, sorry. and it's Aristoteles and Eudoxus. There's Aristoteles, and that is Eudoxus. They're easy targets in binoculars. They're best seen day 6 or 7 after the new moon, and they're at the edge of Mare Frigoris, which is the Sea of Cold. This is a photograph I took some years back. So this is just a blow up of that picture. Eudoxus is the younger of the two. We know this because there is debris from Eudoxus inside Aristotle's crater. They're fairly wide craters. Aristoteles is 87 kilometers wide. Eudoxus is 67 kilometers wide. And they're both about 3,500 meters deep. Like I say, they're very easy to see with binoculars, and of course, you can't miss them in a telescope. Aristotle's obviously is named after a Greek philosopher. Eudoxus is named after a Greek astronomer who both lived in the 3rd century BC. And there's a much better picture than anything I'll ever take of the two craters, Aristotle's and Eudoxus, the smaller of the two. Constellation I'm going to talk about is Ursa Major, the Great Bear. This time of year, as I showed earlier, Ursa Major is placed well up in the sky. You can't miss it. Hanging well, upside down, actually, if you are looking north. I always pick 2 objects in a constellation, and what I'm going to talk about is, first off, 2 galaxies down. You need a mid-sized to large telescope to see these things. M81, or Bode's Galaxy, and M82, the Cigar Galaxy. They're fairly close to each other. If you have a wide field reflector, you can get both of them in the same field of view. If you have a Schmidt-Cassegrain, like the one I use most of the time, you do have to move it just a little bit to get to go from one to the other. They won't fit in the same field of view. They're about 11 to 12 million light years from here. One is an irregular galaxy, that's M82. And M81 is a beautiful spiral galaxy. It's a favorite target of mine. The other target in Ursa Major I want to talk about is this guy here, which is actually 2 stars, Mizar and Alcor. Mizar and Alcor are a double star. They're easy to split in a pair of binoculars. They're about 78 light years from Earth. And we now know that Mizar has an additional 5 stars in its system. And Alcor is also a binary star. So there's a lot of stars packed into that little area. That star was used as an eye test in ancient times. If you could see the 2 stars, you had exceptional vision. I can't see 2 stars even with my glasses on. I guess my vision isn't very good. So this is a picture through a telescope of Mizar, the brighter of the 2, and then Alcor. And as I say, it's an easy double. It's probably the easiest double out there to split. And like I say, you can do it in a pair of binoculars, or if you have really, really good eyesight, you can just do it naked eye. And this is the 2 galaxies, M81 here, nice spiral, and then M82, and you can see by its shape why it's called the Cigar Galaxy. Now, I always like to talk about the stories about constellations, and Ursa Major has a lot of stories. For example, April showers bring May flowers. It was said that the reason we get so much rain in the spring is the water would be falling out of the Dipper portion of Ursa Major. The Big Dipper is not a constellation per se, it's an asterism, and it's part of Ursa Major, the Great Bear. So, if you're wondering why we get so much rain in the spring, blame the Big Dipper. All that water's falling out of it. It's also the people in the Middle East and Europe were not the only people to see a bear in this constellation. Many cultures around the world see a bear, even though it does have a tail. And the Northern Cree who live around here have the story of Mista Muska, a great bear who terrorized the people and animals, stealing from them, wrecking their houses, and even killing some people. He was just roaming the countryside without any sort of check or balance on him. And a grand council was called to do something about this bear. And they decided, we have to get rid of the bear. We have to kill the bear. So they found 7 of their bravest and best hunters to deal with the bear. Throughout the year, they chased the bear around the world. Eventually, the bear ran up into the sky, and the 7 hunters followed him. There's more to the story. This is just a Reader's Digest version of the story. But the 7 hunters who followed are also reside in the sky in the constellation that we now call Corona Borealis. And the phone is ringing. Hang on, I'm just going to mute it here. Hang on. There. Okay, sorry about that. Someone else can get it. Okay, so that's the story of Mista Muskwa. And then there's another story which I found. And it relates to the slave trade in the southern United States. And it relates to a song called Follow the Drinking Gourd. Now, this is the sky in the fall from Mobile, Alabama. And you can see just a little bit of Ursa Major below the horizon. Of course, in our latitudes, this constellation is circumpolar, it never sets. But down in the southern United States, it does. So this is the sky in March in Mobile, Alabama. And the story goes, and I don't know if it's true or not, it sounds plausible, we'll say, but the song was never published until the 1920s. And what would, how the story goes, that workmen would travel the south singing a song at plantations with instructions in the lyrics of how to make your way north to the free states, following the drinking gourd. And I printed out here. So the first verse is, when the sun comes back and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man's waiting just to carry you to freedom, follow the drinking gourd. The drinking gourd, of course, being the dipper. So what it's saying is, in the springtime, when the gourd is up in the sky and the first quail calls, as quails are returning, now that's the time to leave. And then it has instructions about following along a river, and that there would be marks on dead trees indicating you're on the right path, that you would get to an area between 2 hills, and there would be another river, which they take it to be the Ohio River, on the other side of these 2 hills that you would continue to follow, always going north to the Free States. So it's a wonderful story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is a bit of sky lore in about Ursa Major / the Big Dipper. So other highlights this month. Asteroid Vesta is visible in Leo with binoculars. There's a finder chart on Heavens Above website, and I'll have that website at the end of this. The waxing moon rides high in the sky in April. In March and April, especially, the ecliptic is very, very high in our latitude, and it's very easy to see a 1 or 2 day old moon when the ecliptic is that high. So try and view a 1 day old moon on April the 12th. About half an hour after sunset, find a clear western horizon, well, slightly northwest now. The sun has moved north now. And see if you can spot a very thin crescent. The waxing moon and Mars team up on April the 16th. Be a very nice view. They'll be less than 4 degrees away from one another. Take a picture. And then Venus emerges low in the evening twilight. Oh, I didn't do that in the planetarium section. I'm sorry. So try to view Mercury above Venus in the last few days of April. And the Lyrian meteor shower peaks in the early morning hours of April 22nd, but there is a gibbous moon which will interfere, washing out the fainter meteors. So we got a few maps here. Here's the sky on April 16th at 11 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time with Mars and the moon. And while you're at it, swing over with a pair of binoculars and try and find Vesta. There is finder charts on the Heavens Above website, and also others if you want to check. Just Google Vesta 2021 finder chart and you'll find something. And as I mentioned before, the Lyrian meteor shower, which peaks on April the 22nd. There is a small constellation which contains a very, very bright star, Vega, first magnitude star. All winter, Vega has been hanging around the north horizon and never actually sets here. It's another one of the circumpolar stars, so it never sets in Edmonton. But you can use Vega to track down the radiant. Now this shower comes from the comet Thatcher, which is a long period comet. Typically there's 18 to 20 meteors per hour, but like I said, the moon was going to wash out the fainter ones. The meteors move at about 48 kilometers a second. And I should point out, before we go into the next section, that on April 1st, sun comes up at 7:06 a.m. and sets at 8:10. And on April the 30th, the sun is rising at 6 a.m. and sets at 9:03. And we still have lots of time to get to when we have our longest day of the year, when the sun sets well after 10 o'clock. Okay, every month I do a little section on it happened this month in space. It didn't go very well. I should really put some music. And to be part of this section, it has to happen in the month in a year that is divisible by 5. So this year, the year has to end in a 1 or a 6. So April was an easy month to find 2 big events in space history. And the first one occurred April 12, 1961, when Yuri Gagarin became the first person to fly in space on Vostok 1. Gagarin was 27 years old at the time, a Soviet Air Force lieutenant, I believe. And he rode his spacecraft Vostok 1, Vostok meaning east. I have a few artifacts from this time. For example, This is the Edmonton Journal from April 1261. Sorry, I should really have kept it in better shape, but I folded it up and put it into a plastic protector. So it's got some creases on it. And the headline reflects the thinking of the time. Red spaceman orbits Earth in 89 minutes. Not first man in space, but he was a red. Dirty commie. But steak was 79 cents a pound back then. What a deal. Now, the Vostok spacecraft, at the time, nobody really knew what it looked like. This is the drawing that was on the front page of the journal, and they had it looking very similar to the American Mercury spacecraft, which had yet to carry a person into space, but a few months earlier it carried a chimpanzee on a suborbital flight. Life magazine envisioned that it would look like a cylinder of some sort. The only thing that, for those of us who were alive at the time, we know that everything that came out of the Soviet Union was very secretive. They were a very secretive society. They kept their cards pretty close to their chest. They didn't really say too much. I mean, Gagarin was already on the ground before they announced that he had even gone up, just in case something went wrong. They didn't want to say, hey, we're going to launch a guy and then something happened, or hey, we got a guy in space and then something happens. They waited till he was back and then they announced it. So very secretive. The only thing they said about the spacecraft was how much it weighed. And it was a huge spacecraft compared to what was going on with Mercury in the US. It weighed 4,300 kilograms compared to Mercury, which only weighed 1,400 kilograms. So this is a big spacecraft. And it wasn't until 1967 when they brought a Vostok mock-up as well as the R7 rocket that launched it to the Paris Air Show that people in the West finally got to see what this thing actually looked like. So this is the R7 rocket, and if it looks familiar, hey, it looks kind of like what they used to launch Soyuz. It is. The first stage is the same rocket as that launched Sputnik, that launched Vostok, that launched all the Soyuzes. It's the same rocket. They just put a different upper stage on it, and away you go. The Russians are great. If it works, why change it? So the spacecraft itself, got another visual here. It came in two parts. There was the re-entry module, or the crew cabin. It was a sphere with the cosmonaut inside. He sat in an ejection seat because he would actually land in it. When it came back to Earth, he would eject and land on his own parachute. And an instrument module, which contained power, oxygen, water, everything that the cosmonaut would need for 10 days in space. Now, they never actually flew a 10-day Vostok mission, and Gagarin only flew one orbit. The reason they supplied 10 days worth of provisions was if the retro rocket didn't fire, the orbit would decay within 10 days, and the cosmonaut would survive. Later on, when they did the Voskhod missions, Voskhod was basically a modified Vostok, but they modified the inside so it would hold either 3 cosmonauts without pressure suits for Voskhod 1, or 2 cosmonauts with pressure suits for Voskhod 2. They clamped a backup retro rocket on the top in case this one failed, because they could not supply 10 days of consumables for 2 people or 3 people. It's another computer drawing of Vostok, and I have this one because when Gagarin re-entered the atmosphere, all the power, air, etc., from the equipment module was carried into the crew cabin through this umbilical. This is like a big plug that plugs into the side of the crew cabin. The equipment module is jettisoned right after the retro-rocket fires. They jettison it. Well, this umbilical didn't attach, so the crew cabin was still attached to the equipment module, and it was hanging by a cable. This is actually a big thick cable. So if you can imagine, let's find a couple things here to play with here. Okay, so if this is the crew cabin and this is the equipment module, they would be like that. So what was happening, they were held together with a cable and they were tumbling over and over and over. So Gagarin had a fairly rough ride, and until eventually friction with the Earth's atmosphere burnt through the cable and that separated, and then the crew cabin would realign itself to its proper entry attitude. And this is Vostok 1 on the ground, and you can see some of that uneven burning along the top, most likely because of it being still attached to the equipment module on the way down. Vostok was an entirely automated spacecraft. The pilot really just went along for the ride. They did give him a combination to unlock the controls if the automation failed, but for all the Vostok missions, they had no control over their spacecraft, unlike the American Mercury, where the pilots were able to control their spacecraft in pitch, roll, and yaw. Vostok couldn't do that. It would automatically align itself for orbital flight. When the equipment module was jettisoned, it would align itself for reentry by itself. It kind of reminds me of a story I heard once. I think it was on talking about aircraft automation systems, how someday, maybe the pilot won't be necessary, but you would have to have the pilot up in the front just in case something went wrong. And you would have a pilot, a dog, and a big button that the pilot would push if he ever wanted to take control of the plane. And the dog was there to bite him if he ever tried. So it's a funny story. Now, back in 2015 at the Science Center, which we worked very closely with at the RASC in Edmonton, we were doing a Yuri's Day celebration, and I threw this little video together, added some music, and when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I said, why make a whole new one when I'll use this old one? So here we go. Okay. You might have noticed there's one gentleman that keeps popping up. There's a fella talking on the radio, the guy embracing Gagarin before he launched and inspecting the capsule once he landed. That's Sergei Korolev, who was basically ran the Russian space program. His identity was never revealed until after he died due to a botched operation in 1966. Um, they felt that the West might try and kidnap this guy. He was known only as the chief designer. The man was absolutely brilliant. He had a very interesting life. He was actually a political prisoner of Stalin for some time. During one of his purges, at least he didn't end up getting shot like so many other people. It's felt that if Korolev had lived, Russians may have beat the Americans to the moon. Who knows? It's one of those things. Oh, don't want to hear that again. Okay. All right. It was a huge propaganda victory for the Soviet Union to put the first person in space. They sent Gagarin on a world tour. Here he is with Nikita Khrushchev, who was chairman of the Soviet Union at the time. He went around the world. He never flew in space again. They felt he was too valuable of a propaganda piece, I guess you could say, to risk having him fly in space again, although he desperately did want to go up again. Much like John Glenn on the Americans didn't fly again until he was actually a U.S. senator and proposed to NASA that maybe they can study the effects of old age as it compares to space travel. So he did eventually get a second flight on the space shuttle. And I couldn't help but throw this in. This is the opening page of those 16 pages on space in Life magazine. Soviet travel returns from out of this world. And there he is walking down the red carpet. And I had to throw this in because this is on the back of that magazine, an ad for Salem cigarettes, refreshes your taste, air softens every puff. And I don't know if you can read this. Take a puff, it's springtime. Gentle and soft as a springtime breeze. So those are the ads in 1961. Okay, the next item happened on the same date, but 20 years later, April 12th, 1981. And that was the first flight of the space shuttle. It's coming up on 40 years since this thing first flew. It doesn't seem that long ago, and it's been retired for 10 already. So the space shuttle was obviously an American reusable spacecraft. It promised much, delivered some. It was intended to fly many, many, many missions. They were talking about flying 30, 40 missions a year. In the end, after 30 years in service, it flew 135 times between 5 different orbiters. It was years behind schedule, of course over budget. It was originally supposed to fly in 1978. And this is a picture of Columbia rolling out, the very first space shuttle Columbia rolling out in 1981. You'll notice the tank isn't orange. It's kind of a cream color. It's because they painted it. They painted the tank on the first 2 missions for STS-1 and STS-2. Then decided we don't really need to paint it, and we can put 600 pounds, we can save 600 pounds of weight, which is how much the paint weighed to paint this big tank, and use it for payload. So the crew of the first space shuttle mission was John Young, this fellow here, and Robert Crippen, Bob Crippen. John Young was one of the most experienced astronauts at the time. He was a veteran. He flew 2 Gemini flights, Gemini 3 and Gemini 10. He also flew 2 Apollo flights, Apollo 10, which went to the moon and tested the lunar module in lunar orbit, and Apollo 16, and he was the commander of Apollo 16. He actually landed on the moon. So he was the only space shuttle astronaut to actually walk on the moon. So on April 12th, 1961, or pardon me, 1981, Space Shuttle Columbia launched from the Kennedy Space Center. It was originally going to launch on the 10th, but it was scrubbed due to a computer problem. So I put together a little movie here. I think we've all seen space shuttle launches, but I think they're cool.
T-minus 15, 14, 13, T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine. America's first space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Okay, sorry if that was a little loud. I used the soundtrack from an IMAX movie for this one. Okay, one of the first things they do when they get the shuttle into orbit is they open the payload bay doors, because the inside of the payload bay doors contain the radiators which disperse the heat from all the electronics on board the shuttle. And on this first flight, when they opened the payload bay doors, they got quite a surprise, and you could probably see that on the OMS, or the orbital maneuvering system pods, these things here, there's some tiles missing. So I've got a little video of when they first let Houston see what was going on.
Okay, we want to show you our own pods here. We do have a few tiles missing off of both of them. Off of the starboard pod, it's got basically what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces, and off the port pod, looks like I see one full square, and looks like a few little triangular shapes that are missing, and we're trying to put that on TV right now.
Okay, this was of great concern. When Columbia was shipped from California, where they built it, to the Kennedy Space Center in 1979, it arrived looking like this. As you can see, it's not quite all there. Here's a better view. And this was, they lost scores and scores of tiles on this cross-country flight. It was not flying in space, it was flying on the back of a 747. So compared to how fast it is supposed to fly, it wasn't really going all that fast. But there was definitely, they definitely had a problem with the tiles sticking to the orbiter. And they had to come up with a solution before they could fly it into space. Now, this is the shuttle Endeavour. It's at California Science Museum. And if you get up really close, well, first off, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, it's a lot bigger than I thought it was. You know, this thing is a pretty big hunk of machinery. So, and it's covered with thousands and thousands and thousands of these tiles. These are the underside, the black tiles. And that's a close-up. Everyone is individually cut. Each one has its own serial number. Each one has its own map of where they put it on. And that's me standing there with my mouth hanging open when I first walked into the room where they have the shuttle. Now, the tiles on the ohms pads are the white tiles. The white tiles are for lower heat, but the black tiles are the ones for the high heat. And they cover the nose and the whole underside of the orbiter. And they were worried that even if one of these black tiles was missing, when it came back through the atmosphere, it could burn through, or even worse, it could cause a zipper effect where the air would get into that gap and start stripping all the tiles off, and you would lose the vehicle. And of course, you would lose the crew too. So at the time, and this must have really hurt the assets in the Air Force and the CIA, but they asked them to use their ground-based instruments and also their satellites in orbit to inspect the shuttle and to inspect the underside and see if there were any tiles missing. And I know they hated to do that, because if they say we don't see any problem, all the tiles are there, it's also telling the Russians, because this is still in the Cold War, just the capabilities, some of the capabilities of these ground-based instruments and satellites that they had to look at it. But anyway, the safety of the astronauts was at stake. So they inspected the bottom. They said, hey, it's okay. The shuttle should be able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and land safely. They determined later on that the tiles came off the ohms pad due to sound waves generated at launch. Now they did do a water deluge before launch, mostly to protect the pad, but they beefed up that water deluge to also suppress the sound. So they did that on future launches, and they didn't really have much of a problem. So I've got a landing video.
You're 500 feet. Clear. You're down. 50 feet. Boarding. 30. 20. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, down. Those gears, 10 feet. 5, 4, 3, touchdown. Put the ball, skipper. Do you want us to take it up the hangar, Joe? We're going to dust it off first. This grid is all electric flying machine, I'll tell you that. It was super.
Okay. Now they landed at Edwards Air Force Base because for the first flight they wanted a lot of room. And they didn't land on one of the runways. They landed on the dry lake bed again because they wanted a lot of room. Just in case, things didn't go according to plan. You also note there was no drag chute that popped up. They didn't actually add the drag chute to the shuttle until after the Challenger accident. They made many, many changes to the shuttle after the Challenger accident because the investigators found there wasn't just the O-ring in the solid rocket booster that was causing the problem, but they had a lot of other problems, specifically with the brakes and with the steering. They did not use nose wheel steering on the shuttle. They used differential pressure on the rear brakes, and they were blowing tires and stuff like that. So they added a chute. They changed the steering. They did a lot of different changes to the shuttle to make it safer. And of course, They also, all the astronauts wore pressure suits from then on. Before the first 4 flights, which were considered test flights, the astronauts wore pressure suits, but after that they just wore coveralls. So I always plug Heavens Above because it's lots of good information. If you want to find Vesta, there's finder charts for that. Oh, I forgot to mention there's a NOVA in Cassiopeia right now. And if you Google NOVA 2021 Cassiopeia, there'll be finder charts so you can look at it. It's easy to see in binoculars. The next What's Up is going to be on May the 5th at 7:30 Mountain Daylight Time. And that's all I've got. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or comments. Everybody's muted, so if anyone tries to talk to me, I can't hear you. Well, okay, I guess that's it then. As I said, I do record these, and they're on the RASC Edmonton YouTube channel. There's also other things. Alistair Ling does a introduction to sky watching. Those are also on our YouTube channel, and it follows the requirements to get a Observe the Universe certificate. And thank you for your kind comments, and thank you for the people from Toronto for joining us. That was really nice. I could say something about how badly you guys beat up on our poor old Oilers, except for that last game. Even then, that was pretty close, but I guess I won't. All right, so if there's nothing else, I'll say very good night to everybody, and thank you very much.